The relationship between the sagas of Icelanders and hagiography has long been a subject of speculation. Even if we now tend to view the two things as incompatible, or at least highly dissimilar, people in the 13th century may have seen things differently. We know that works of hagiography, mostly translations, entered the Icelandic literary system before the sagas. In the first grammatical treatise, a linguistic work written in Icelandic in the mid-12th century, we find valuable evidence about what kinds of writings had been produced in Iceland by that time. This is before the sagas in a written form come into existence. The anonymous author describes his intention to introduce the Latin alphabet to communicate more effectively that literature which is already there. Laws, genealogies, or sacred writings, and also that historical lore which Ari Þorgilsson has recorded in his books with such understanding wit. So, sacred writings are described as one of 4 main strands in the earliest writings in Icelandic. But how exactly did the sagas develop out of this earliest stage? In 1953, Gabriel Turvil Peter, professor of ancient Icelandic literature and antiquities at the University of Oxford, attempted an answer to the question in his monograph, Origins of Icelandic Literature. In an oft-cited passage, Turvil Peter says, "The saints' lives and the homilies are not among the best or most interesting of Icelandic literature. Only occasionally do they express the thoughts or the artistic taste of the Icelandic people, and they tell little about the traditions and antiquities of the North. But they were more important for the Icelanders of the 12th century than they are for us. They were the first written biographies which the Icelanders came to know. The Icelanders learned from them how biographies and wonder tales could be written in books. Thus, they helped the Icelanders to develop a literary style in their own language and gave them the means to express their own thoughts through the medium of letters. In a word, the learned literature did not teach the Icelanders what to think or what to say, but it taught them how to say it. It's unlikely that the sagas of kings and of Icelanders, or even the sagas of ancient heroes, would have developed as they did unless several generations of Icelanders had first been trained in hagiographic narrative. Several people have reacted to these words. Among them is Margaret Cormack, professor of religious studies at the College of Charleston. I asked her if Turvil Peter's statement was as valid now as it was back in 1953.
Well, first let me emphasize what Turvil Peter is talking about and what he isn't talking about. He talks about biographies, and biography is, in the first place, only a small fraction of the total of hagiography or saints' lives. There are plenty of saints' lives that are just the death of the saint or just miracle collections and so on and so forth. And likewise, biography is only a very small fraction of the sagas. Some sagas indeed deal with specific individuals, but others deal with whole families or districts for many generations. Now, those larger sagas may indeed have biographies inside them, but even the sagas about a single individual that you would think would be biographical have extensive prefaces. So, for example, in the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, you're a quarter of the way through the saga before Egil is even born. Both Peter Foote and I have discussed the famous quotation in a conference in Odense, which was published as Hagiography and Medieval Literature, a symposium. Very nice descriptive title. And we both concluded that the situation was a little bit more complicated than Turvil Peter had allowed for if you interpret his quote very strictly. And Peter Foote, who actually knew Professor Turvil Peter, who died unfortunately before his time, he said, "I think that Gabriel what he really wanted to say is," quote, "the learned literature by no means dictated the Icelanders' choice and treatment of subject matter of what they said, but it taught them something about how to say it, also about how not to say it."